Hi darlings, welcome back to The Library is Open. So I hope you brought your library cards, my darlings. I am just back from New York City. Well, I say just back. I got back yesterday when I'm filming this, and suffice it to say, it shows. Desperately battling the jet lag, so if this is slightly incomprehensible in any place, you know why. But here is my wrap up for the first month of the Dickens-Morrison-athon, which is the year-long project I'm running to read the back catalogues of Charles Dickens and Toni Morrison as voted for by you on both YouTube and Instagram. Now, in the month of January, I read, in chronological order of publication, I read Charles Dickens' The Pickwick Papers and Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. So to give you a quick overview of The Pickwick Papers, this was one of Charles Dickens' earliest pieces of writing that was published, and it was serialized in many installments, which kind of accounts for the chunkiness of the book. And this is a comedy, which I don't dispute, that deals with the lives of four principal wealthy gentlemen in Victorian society who are kind of gadding around the country, falling in love, life and laughter, and in and out of escapades, which includes some social commentary about class and also debt and criminality and so on and so forth. What makes this really, really shine is the wit and the kind of gentle sarcasm that Dickens applies to the characters, and also the way in which he doesn't shy away from, as I say, that kind of social commentary. He deals a lot with a debtor's prison and the kind of lot, if you will, of the working class in this. So it's very much feels quite contemporary in tone because it's quite satirical, while sort of not shying away from those really deep points that matter. I think the kind of four main characters, probably the best drawn is Sam Weller, who is the kind of Sancho Panza to Mr. Pickwick, his sort of Man Friday, if you will, or sort of go-to person, who is extremely well drawn. I'll admit I read this physically, and I also listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by Rory Kinnear, and that was excellent. Rory Kinnear does a wonderful job and is one of my favourite actors, and he really kind of brings each individual character to life. I think Dickens grapples with the unscrupulousness of Dickensian, Victorian society, and how everyone was out to make a book. But also, you know, there's a lot of hope in here as well about, you know, the kind of the joys of true love and fun and camaraderie. Couldn't get my words out there, you see, jet lag. But also there's a lot of stuff that I really enjoy, where it kind of meanders off into like stories told by travellers. I think what's really obvious is that it was originally meant to be serialised, and that it was you know, to be enjoyed in these specific chunks rather than in a full novel. But I don't think that's necessarily a detriment. It just takes time to work through, which is why I kind of went with the audiobook as well. I think what's really fascinating as well is you can trace how he started out conceptualizing what the series would be, and how that very swiftly goes from being quite, I guess, impersonal and quite broad to very specifically focused on the four main characters. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. It did take ages, as I say, and it's chunky, but it was a really good kickoff to the Dickens year. In contrast, not in terms of enjoyment, but in terms of both length and subject matter, we have Toni Morrison's first published novel, The Bluest Eye, which includes a foreword by her in which she talks about the fact that she doesn't necessarily think she's been successful in what she was setting out to do. So The Bluest Eye is a kind of exploration around racism, colorism, sort of internalized feelings of shame and comparing oneself to another. So it deals with a little black girl called Pecola, Breedlove, and her kind of longing for blue eyes and blonde hair, and it's kind of becomes an obsession for her as she deals with the social issues of America at the time. What's really interesting is that it switches narrators, and we follow several plot lines at once, where we get to see multiple perspectives on things, and also that how things coalesced and came to be. There is some quite potentially triggering content in this with regard to assault and the nature of relationships and consent and so on and so forth, as well as, you know, underage of consent issues that do need to be borne in mind. But I think that in looking at kind of gender, race, and the notion of beauty, pretty, privilege, so on and so forth, I think she does a wonderful job. It's very evocative and it's very uncomfortable at times, but the good kind of uncomfortable, where you feel like, yes, this should be uncomfortable because these are uncomfortable issues. And even though this was originally published in 1970, I don't think many of those issues have gone away. There's a really interesting framing as well with the kind of Dick and Jane or Janet and John kind of children's stories at the beginning that kind of talks about, you know, these kind of basic ideas around family relationships, many of which don't conform to the relationships that we see in the book. But I really like that kind of framing device. It feels like a very important piece, irrespective of whether kind of Toni Morrison feels like it achieved what it set out to do. I think it's a wonderful conversational piece to keep talking about and discussing these issues, and really, you know, probing deeply into whether, I guess, advances in like political kind of notions of equality are actually reflected in the social experience of the people to whom that pertains. So I really, really enjoyed is a strange word for given the content of this, but because as I say, it does figure some quite triggering potentially content, but I'm very glad that I read it, and I think it was a really great start to this project from Toni Morrison. So those are the first two. That's my little mini wrap up. I'm trying to keep them a little bit short as well, so that you can kind of just hear my thoughts rather than me going into a full dissection of the book, particularly when they're shorter, because I don't want to spoil anything. But next month, or rather this month now, because it is the 1st of February, I will be reading Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, and I believe I'm reading The Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison this time. No, I'm reading Sula as my next read by Toni Morrison, so keep your eyes peeled for updates on those at the beginning of March. So in the meantime, put your library cards somewhere safe, my darlings. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I will see you in my next video. Bye-bye.